spread all over this building getting work done. So I ran up from appropriations just to let you all know we're probably, I don't know, 3/4 of the way done down there. So hopefully within the next 5 to 10 minutes we can get started, if that's cool, and we'll have a quorum. from the agenda. I'm going to go ahead and present House Resolution 1300, which is the House's road naming bill. We put a Senate piece on here. We actually, now he would tell you he deserves 2 road namings, but Brandon Beach was actually on the Senate version that we passed over, and he was inadvertently added to the House section here as well. So after I take a motion on this bill, I'm going to move that we strike Part 14, that we strike lines 306 to 308, and that we strike "and United States Treasurer Brandon L. Beach" on line 315 and 16, and we make any renumberings and punctuation changes as needed to accomplish that. Jenny, you comfortable with that as a verbal? I'll take a motion on.
SLC 395118S.
Great. I got a motion and from Senator Gann, a second from Senator Mallow. And then I will take a motion to strike Part 14 that mentions U.S. Treasurer Brandon L. Beach, lines 306 to 308, and then lines 315 and 316, the mention of United States Treasurer Brandon L. Beach. Recognizing that this was in the Senate version as a floor amendment, we were already able to pass over.
Move to amend LC 395118S, striking sections 14 and striking lines. How many of those lines again, Mr. Chairman?
306, 308,
306, 308, and renumbering accordingly and fixing any scrivener's errors.
and striking on lines 315 and 316, and United States Treasurer Brandon L. Beach.
316 as well.
All right, we got a motion to amend. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, in the form of discussion, Senator Gooch, when he looks in the mirror, what does he see?
It's too early.
Do you, Senator Burns, do you know what he sees when he
Yeah,
looks in the
I
mirror?
do,
know
but
what he
I'd
sees.
prefer not to quote it, Mr. Chairman.
Fair enough. We got a motion and a second on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. We're now on to a motion due pass as amended on LC 395118S. We got a motion, Senator again. We got a second from someone?
I'll second.
Senator Gooch. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. All right, and I will carry this on the Senate floor, and we'll have, Senator McNeil, you've got what's going to be a late arriving road naming appropriately, and really just kind of in keeping the spirit of your tenure so far, you will be adding that to a House bill and not to the Senate bill. So you'll continue your work on House bills. And I believe there's one more senator that will working on a naming, road naming for it. Who is that? Justin. It's
Senator McNeil and Senator Davenport.
Senator Davenport. So let's get word to Senator Davenport to get us the information she needs so we can get that done, get it back over to the House for an agree. We will move on to, what are we going to do next here? Let's do House Bill 1277. A little department bill here. Representative Barton, you got your wingman there. I'll turn the mic on for both of y'all. Why don't you all go ahead and present this bill, and I believe we're going to have one amendment, and then we're going to plan to get this bill on the floor Friday to get it over to y'all in the House with enough time for hopefully an agree with a simple amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee. This is the department bill, as you said. It updates the outdated dollar thresholds. It streamlines reporting requirements and provides GDOT reasonable flexibility in how projects are delivered. The bill raises the environmental review trigger for road and airport projects from $100 million to $200 million, reflecting the current cost construction while keeping the historic and cultural protections in place. It also updates the threshold for negotiated sale of surplus GDOT property from $75,000 to $150,000 and allows CPI adjustments going forward, so we don't have to do this again. And it finally consolidates transportation reporting into a single annual fiscal report instead of the redundancy that it has. So this bill is about efficiency and updating the cost of inflation. It's pretty meat and potatoes of the version of the bill.
Mr. Waller, do y'all have any towing or booting things on here this year that
No, and
might
no-
draw the ire of the committee?
And no drones.
No
There are no drones in this
drones.
bill.
Fair enough. I'm going to recognize Senator again for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On surplus property sales, you go from 75 to 150. When was the last time that was updated?
2015.
Okay. Just wondered what half your money goes to.
Oh,
You think about going from 75 to 150?
well, so it's just keeping it on pace
I
with
got
where
it.
it was.
I got it.
And so just
Your real
some
estate values.
well, some context for that is a property of about that value is what we'd call an uneconomic, typically the uneconomic remnants, where the only likely purchaser of the property is an adjacent property owner because that property probably has no additional access, no other value that would make it, value of competitively pricing it. So we save on the cost of trying to market it, as well as everything that goes into putting it out there for multi-party, because your only buyer is going to be an adjacent property owner.
And they don't need any more and not have to maintain it.
Put them back on the tax digest and get it back into good use.
Any other questions on the bill?
So moved.
We are going to have an amendment from Senator Gooch, but I will recognize Senator again for a motion.
Move to pass HB 1277, the LC 474068S.
We have a motion from Senator again, second from Senator Dixon. I'm going to recognize Senator Gooch for an amendment.
You should see an amendment on, in your packet. It's AM 390525. And all this is an extension of the 2-year window that we gave the Department of Agriculture to get ready for the electric chargers that were being deployed around the state. They would have to set up equipment to calibrate and measure the output of all those public charging stations to make sure that the consumer was actually getting what they were paying for. The equipment has not been very forthcoming. The technology is being developed, and the department is ready to move forward when that equipment arrives, but we do not have it. So we're just simply asking for a 2-year extension on that deadline that we put in code 2 years ago.
DC amp meter.
It's a little more complicated than that. You could use one now.
All right, sorry about that. So, Senator Gooch, what's the current implementation date?
Current implementation date was for this year.
Okay, so January 1st, 26.
Yes.
So we're obviously not able to comply
There's
with
just no
that.
feasible way.
27.
27.
So
there's no way to.
it was
27.
January 1st, 27.
Yeah, that's the end of this year.
Originally, yeah.
One day after this year.
Or, no,
So this,
yeah.
the language on line 26 pushes it to 28.
Yes.
You wanted to do it for 1 year or 2 years?
We wanted to do it for 2 years.
So we may need to look at just,
So it's 2 years.
we may have put the wrong version in here. So if you wanted to go 2 years, I believe you need to push it down to 29.
Does it not say 28?
On line 20, it says 28 on line 26.
Right.
Did you want it to be 28 or 29?
Yes. I would say let's go with this.
28,
Yes.
Okay.
If it pleases the committee.
okay. Which will be a 1-year extension.
Yeah, there may be some more appropriations required for the implementation. Some of the monies have been appropriated already, some of the money's been spent, the pickup truck's been purchased, but there's other equipment that has to be acquired, so.
And this is for, just remind the committee of essentially what, this is, there was a bill that passed a few years ago to have Department of Ag kind of regulate and inspect EV chargers similar to how they do
That's
gasoline
right.
pumps
So,
currently.
give some of the new guys in the committee some background. We currently charge EVs a flat fee per year. If you have a Tesla or electric Porsche, whatever your electric car is, you charge it at home, you pay $250.
Around 200, yeah, I think it's 242 or something.
$250 a year for that car. However, with the deployment of a lot of the commercial electric vehicles like Rivian, they're building a truck, a service delivery vehicle for like Amazon, UPS, FedEx. Those trucks could spend as much as 50, 60,000 miles a year on our public roads. $200 is not going to cover the wear and tear on our vehicles. And so, correct, on the roads, thank you, Frank. And so the idea was to charge a flat fee per kilowatt at these public charging stations and at these commercial charging depots like the Amazons and the FedExes and UPSs and so forth and so on. So the fee was appropriated and it was put into code. The problem has arisen that, you know, just like the Department of Ag today has to go out and calibrate gas pumps to make sure when you buy a gallon of gasoline or a gallon of diesel, you're actually getting a gallon of gasoline or diesel. No one has come up with a scenario yet to measure the output of these charging stations, so the Department of Ag has been working with Georgia Tech and other professionals in the industry to come up with that technology. Other states are doing the same thing, and so we're just a little ahead of the curve in having that technology available. So we hope this year and next year the technology will be available. We'll be able to deploy that, and the Department of Agriculture will be responsible for measuring those outputs.
So this keeps the current law in place and it just
That's,
changes the
that's
date.
all it does.
All right. We have a motion to amend. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Senator Mallow. All those in favor of the amendment, which is Amendment 390525, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. That motion carries unanimously. We are now on to the underlying bill, LC 474068S, as amended. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously, and we will work to get this on the floor Friday. I'm gonna try to think if we can even do that. We gotta read it out.
Reads today.
We may not be able to. Yeah, we may need to be next week. We'll get it done for you.
I think you
All
can
right.
do it.
Thanks.
We'll get it section one.
Yeah, it'll
If you reread it out this morning, it'll be.
Yeah, that's right. We'll read it today. So it should be Friday. Who's gonna be your Senate sponsor on this?
I don't have one, so it's
All right.
y'all's choice.
I'd be happy to carry it for you if you'd like, or Senator Gooch, you're more than welcome to as well.
Your choice, whatever you want to do.
You know what? Why don't you take it, since you got your language on here, you've done a lot of work on the electric charging stuff. And all right, we'll have Senator Gooch carry
Thank
that.
you, guys.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. All right, we are now on to House Bill 297. I think it's a little heavier than it was in its original version. This is going to be a substitute we're working off of. Senator Anderson and, sorry, Representative Anderson. Yeah, Senator Anderson Vitarte, why don't you join him? I know you've done a lot of work on this as well. We've had an initial hearing, I think, on the overall, I know, on the overall framework of a version of this, which is a consolidation of some of our agencies. And I know there's been some work that's been done since the committee discussed this last time. And Leader Vitarte, you were the one that presented this last time, and now I know Representative Anderson's done some work on this as well and is familiar with this.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could start, you know, most of us are parents, and sometimes you really enjoy watching your children grow up to be much more than you expected and they should have been. So House Bill 297 started out as a relatively small, innocuous ad valorem tax exemption bill that was not necessary due to Department of Revenue rules. And so 2 years ago, I carried House Bill 1358, which identified a lot of the issues that are identified in the substitute that this committee is bringing forth. And so I'm fully in support of this, and appreciate the Leader Anna Vitarte in helping me, or presenting this option, and I'm in full support.
All right. Why don't you walk us through the bill? You're working off of LC 395117S, is that?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm going to go over the highlights. I do want to just remind the committee of kind of why we're here today, and then we'll take questions. I don't think this will take too long. So basically, this bill is restructuring, you know, what is transportation governance in Georgia as it relates to transit. And so, you know, some of the redundancies and, you know, what I would just describe as overreach that has been going on is, you know, related to a few different things. So having two identical transportation agencies, Greta and the ATL, with sweeping powers. Some of the sweeping powers, and some of y'all I know are familiar, some of y'all may not be familiar for our newer members. Things like, for example, overriding local land use and zoning, withholding state funding from local governments for noncompliance with authorities related to transit and transportation plans, causation of local governments to enact or increase taxes to pay for authorities' transit transportation plans. One of the bigger ones that we're very grateful for, the leaders in the state who have not enacted the powers that allow Greta to use eminent domain on local governments and property owners. I think that's one of the, I'll call it almost hidden powers that really, has been kind of tucked away in a cave that I think ultimately needs to go away. Can force actions by DOT and DNR, issue up to $2 billion of state-backed bonds. Other redundancies, transit planning can occur at 3 agencies plus ARC. None is required to be fiscally balanced, which I think is important to some of you all. Multiple entities that can administer federal transit funds in Metro Atlanta. Some of the other efficiencies, the election of a 10-member ATL board, board meetings, 10-plus in-person meetings a year, statutory requirements to submit a list of transit projects for GO bonds every year, the statutory requirement for regional ATL branding on all the buses and all the trains, statutory requirements for transit trip planning, mobile phone app creation and maintenance of that. And then I think some of the gaps that, we've identified as we've gone through this process before the last meeting where we talked about this and since then, Mr. Chairman, is, no ability for non-metro counties to take advantage for operating transit with federal funds. I think this entire structure that was created almost 10 years ago is kind of focused on Metro Atlanta, and we know there's, some very specific communities outside of Atlanta and other counties that would like autonomy and the drawdown of those funds and how they're kind of distributed, across the state. We've heard from leaders in other parts of the community, parts of the state around that. And then I think the other part, too, is no representation by the Senate and House on the state board that reviews ARC's transportation, TIP spending plans, private-public collaboration of transportation aspects related to major developments or as some of y'all are familiar with, DRIs when projects take place. So what this bill is going to do, this is a different bill than what I presented to you at the last meeting. We've consulted with members and leaders and local folks all across the state. Is to do several different things. The bill will consolidate the ATL and Greta, streamlining over 70 code sections. It will rename the ATL to become the Georgia Transportation Efficiency Authority. It will cut the size of statutory transportation boards from 31 members down to 7, so that's 77% of the board members will be reduced. The appointments that will be new or added is that the governor will have 5, the lieutenant governor will have 1, the speaker will have 1. It eliminates the just laborious ATL board elections process that's happened all over Metro Atlanta, which I know in some communities is controversial, unnecessary, not really adding anything to the community. It eliminates in-person meeting requirements so that there's some semblance of virtual meetings can be allowed. Next, it will ensure that the state cannot impose on counties its transportation planning mandates or transit services. I know this is one of the big issues with counties in Metro Atlanta and across the state is local communities want some sort of semblance of autonomy. They want their citizens to decide, do they want transit? Do they not want transit? Letting the people have a say, especially in Metro Atlanta. And, what does that look like? And under the powers, these hidden powers, I'll call them, that Greta has had going back to the late 1990s, and then some of them still inherited by the ATL, it takes away the threat of the eminent domain, the threat of forcing local governments to have to pay transit taxes or other things while, we're in this environment right now, and I don't think it's going to change, where people are sick and tired of property taxes, they're sick and tired of taxes in general. They're asking, what are they getting for their government money in terms of investment back into the community? So this puts more power in the hands of the people and less power in the hands of the state politicians. It eliminates the redundancy in air quality regulations that devolves back to EPD and ARC mandates. If you remember, for those that follow Georgia history, when Greta was founded back in the 90s, Greta's founding really revolved around air quality regulations. And many people may not remember that and know that. And then it evolved into something else and something else and something else. As we got new governors over time. And so obviously we believe, kind of that mindset from the 90s and looking at 2026 and where we're at from a transportation, investment, and community and government standpoint is completely outdated and unnecessary. The bill would achieve a limitation. It broadens the potential geographic jurisdiction so that, as I mentioned before, a county and other parts of the state may opt into Georgia T or T with the use of federal funds. Think about T going forward as kind of the holder of those federal funds and how they do a plan to transit. I mean, Georgia T, GT, whatever you want to call it. We'll still operate, for example, express buses, which is basically people who are riding buses to go to school and go to work. That's the primary function of these express buses, as many of you know. A transparent, it preserves important state agency functions such as the following: a transparent review of ARC's transportation spending by a board appointed by state elected officials upon the governor's delegation. Public-private collaboration on transportation aspects of major developments GDOT has as the state's engineering experts. And the provision around DCA, around, as I mentioned before, developments of regional impacts, as those are now and as you know them in your local community, whether you're in Gwinnett County or Paulding County or Cobb County or Bartow County or Coweta County or Cherokee County, stays the same. So we've not messed with or made changes or created confusion for county commissioners or local governments and how those projects happen. And even as I've gone through this provisions of the law with our team and experts, I mean, we learned of 2 projects just in Paulding County we're unaware of that are going through this process. So those kind of projects, when you talk about DRIs related to, Excel, decel lanes with major projects, none of those things will change. The state agency will remain as a designated recipient of the Atlanta Region state and federal transit funds. Transit funds, trust funds previously entered into agreements will continue and to be transferred over to GDOT. So GDOT will manage those. And then the efficient operations of the express buses in currently served counties will continue only. Expansion will require approval of the voters. New requirement that performance metrics must be annually reported. That includes safety, security, customer satisfaction, effectiveness, efficiency on the state agency's transit operations and administration. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll kick it back to you for questions.
I'm going to recognize Senator Mello first for a question on 9.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the majority, just a quick question. Looking at the composition of the board members drastically reducing, consolidating into one, my only question would be 5 individuals appointed by the governor, 3 of whom shall reside in a county within a compliant zone county. My only question would be if it was to make sure that local folks were in control. I don't know who the governor would be in 2027, but the possibility of 3 people being appointed, leaving 2 behind, another from the president of the Senate, another from the speaker, could possibly be 4 people, which would be a majority on the board, that may not live in this affected area. And I just would have concerns if, for example, someone from Savannah was on this board making decisions for counties in which they don't even live or serve in.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I mean, this is going to impact primarily 13 counties. So for example, for Chatham County, I know y'all have operators and, I'm sure y'all have conversations about what is the future of transit. I know you have a lot of economic development projects. And so when we talk about, countywide public referendums in Chatham County, you're not in those 13 counties. So if you make a decision with your Board of Commissioners in Chatham County that you need to pursue X project related to something that you're doing related to the port or something else, the Board of Commissioners in Chatham County can take that upon themselves, make the decision, and implement it. So I think in Chatham County, it's a little bit different than the 13 counties that I'm referring to in Metro Atlanta. So I think
I think he's
you're-
saying.
No, my
I think he's
question
saying
is-
I think he's saying the opposite. He's
I
saying,
apologize.
No, you're fine. Under the bill as currently written, you could have 4 people from Chatham County on the board, 3 people from within the non-attainment zone counties. And he's saying you could actually have kind of forces outside of the area that had control of the board, and I think that's the concern, Senator. Right?
That absolutely is my concern, Mr. Chairman. From lines 187 to 190, you would have 3 people appointed by the governor to have to be in the containment area, and then 1 from the House, 1 from the Senate. The remaining 2 could be from outside of that area, meaning that control would no longer be restricted to those 13 counties, and you could have appointments from various portions of the state that don't even live in this area, making those decisions, and that would be the majority.
Got it, okay.
So, Mr. Leader, walk us through just really quickly. So, the ATL gets consolidated into what you're calling what'd you call it, the Georgia T. What happens to Greta?
So basically, Greta is dissolved.
Okay, Greta's dissolved. The ATL becomes the Georgia T.
And basically, the primary purpose of Georgia T is basically to accept those federal funds for projects. I
Okay.
mean, those funds have to go somewhere. So as it relates to transit planning and all those kinds of those sort of things, basically, most of it just gets pushed between the county and ARC together.
And then what changes, if any, are made to CERTA?
In this bill, none.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
I just want to make sure that maybe to give a Cliff Notes version.
No, that's correct, because we did talk about that in the last committee meeting.
Okay. Recognize Senator again for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Section 3 mentions MARTA. MARTA's been around for about 55 years. I'm looking at how does Georgia T and MARTA kind of coalesce? It references money collected in Fulton County, but it doesn't also recommend or have any statement that I saw. Read a quick look for
What
what's
page
going
are you
on
on,
in DeKalb
Senator?
County.
What
When
page
you
are you on?
start looking in Section 3, so
Page 18.
Okay.
and so for me, I'm trying to figure out. Okay, you're creating a new entity, but one's been around here for a long time.
Right, so this bill doesn't do anything in terms of the powers or anything related to MARTA. Again, all it does is reconforms how the federal funds are drawn down to GT. Is that a Georgia Tech thing? I'm just kidding. But it doesn't, we didn't get into any of the statutory anything that relates to MARTA. Now, there is one thing we did find in the law, maybe a couple of you are aware of this. It was a shocker to some of us, that buried deep in Georgia statute, and I'm not sure if it happened when this bill was passed back in 18 or if it was a previous thing, there was something of a 1/5 penny that Fulton County could create separate from the city of Atlanta for transit funds. And I don't know if that money is being collected or what happened with it, but in this bill, that goes away.
And 2018 is the year that the ATL was formed.
Correct.
Just-
Thank you.
One of the other questions I want to ask is, in here it references the non-attainment zone, and we're all in attainment in Georgia as far as air quality and so forth today. Can you hit on that? What your when you spell out non-attainment zone, what is it you're talking about?
I think
Where
you-
is that?
let me find
Because
it.
Georgia's fully compliant in their air quality.
No, that's right.
May not be next week.
Well, you never know.
So say your question again, Senator, like what's,
The TSA keeps up.
13 counties, right?
yeah,
Static reference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's held in time for a certain time period,
yeah, since the 90s,
non-conforming at that time.
right.
And for loosely, we use similar language. I only know this because when we did our truck weight bill, we used that language. I think it's 13 counties, is that right?
That's correct.
Josh? And you could loosely think of those as metro Atlanta counties.
They are.
Yeah.
And just because you said it, Mr. Chairman, just in transparency, there are code sections in here, as we went through and kind of updated this, that may touch areas around truck weights when you look at it. I want to make sure very clear on the record, nothing was changed, nothing was anything, just a little reconformity, but no definite, nothing was changed.
And last question, because when I look at this, I mean, you know, maybe I'm not, this is 45 pages of legislation that, you know, it's late in the session, and I'm just curious, you know, how well it's been vetted through the process, because I know for me, this looks like a pretty good wholesale change. Is that something we want to do at the very end of a session?
I think this is a very, as I said at the last meeting, this is a very simple but very complex, change. The complex change is just the way this thing was constructed back in 2018. I mean, this is a lot of unnecessary government to basically get to basically drawing down federal funds, and all we're doing is giving power back to local communities to make the decision as to whether they want transit, and also to how those funds are dispersed, and also protecting communities from unnecessary tax and burdens and powers that could be thrown on them. Things like eminent domain. When we think about Greta, I mean, Greta in itself really isn't even an active agency. It's dormant, and it's dormant for a good reason. So all this bill is doing, and why it's, this many pages, is because of basically unwinding all that stuff we did in 2018.
Only thing I'm concerned about is the simplest, government is a dictator. Sadia, and you know, you're cutting down on an awful lot of folks here to get down to that number, and I don't know how much
Well, yeah, Senator, I would argue this bill gets rid of the dictator, because right now the ATL and Greta is the dictator, and this is putting more power in the hands of the citizens and local folks to make decisions for their counties, and that's whether you're in the 13 or Senator Mallow, as we were talking about in Savannah, making sure his people are empowered when it comes to having access to these federal dollars. If you have a community like Chatham County, maybe Effingham County, or somewhere else where there's a lot of economic development projects, to have the opportunity to, leverage those dollars. I mean, things, we think about innovation, we think about technology. A lot of us, the antiquated system of putting a bus on the road and running it from point A to point B, that's one form of transit. But there's another form of transit where if, me and Senator Mallow own two parcels of land somewhere in Savannah, and he's building a technology plant for one product, and I'm a supplier of that product, building some sort of transit mobile line between the two factories to move people back and forth. And maybe it doesn't even touch a public road or a state road or something like that. And I think that's the opportunity, I think, in some rural counties. I'm not going to get into the politics of whether rural counties want transit. I think we all know that they probably don't. But I think there are opportunities for innovation that this gives. And I think it takes these antiquated 1990 laws off the books that could do real damage to local communities and force unnecessary taxation, amongst citizens that don't want it, don't need it, and it gets the state out of their lives.
So walk me through that really quick. Walk me through the essentially what can happen today as it relates to transit that you would characterize as kind of taking that control away from the locals. And if this bill passes, what does that look like then in the future?
Yeah, I mean, just high level, Mr. Chairman. I mean, you know, from a transit planning perspective right now, as relates to the ATL and Greta, is that basically they can write a transportation plan from Dallas to Cumming. And I don't know, I mean, that could be trains, it could be bus rapid transit, it could be some other form of transportation. And basically right now, they could say, your community and my community basically have to figure it out and do it. And I think right now, this creates a disruption of that. It takes the board members who are in those board seats to kind of approve these actions, takes them away, and it puts the decision-making power back to, you know, whether it's the city of Dallas or Paulding County government or the city of Cumming and Forsyth County, and it lets those local leaders and their delegations to collaborate and say, hey, do we want this? And then those communities, you know, kind of in between. I think the other thing,
So let me pause you there.
Please,
So
go ahead.
if Dallas and Paulding County wanted transit under the new law, what would be the process for them?
basically, they would go through the process, the cities and counties would have to adopt local resolutions, and then it would have to go on a countywide referendum. The voters would approve, and then the county would move forward with whatever that next step is.
So there have been instances where Gwinnett County, for example, has had transit referendums. What's, maybe the last one was, I'm not sure, 5 years ago. Seems like they have had a couple that since I've been aware of them. How are those getting placed on the ballot now versus what you're describing would change in the future?
Yeah, so those are being placed on the ballot. You know, I want to kind of say a little bit indiscriminately. I know we passed another bill that Representative Carson is carrying that puts a cap that those can only come back every 8 years. You know, so I think that's probably a little bit of a separate issue, but it doesn't diminish the powers that the counties still have a say to basically put something on a referendum.
Talk to me about the eminent domain piece that you mentioned earlier that is, described it as kind of a hidden power that Greta has. What do they have the ability to do as it relates to, I think you said they can condemn property from a city?
Yeah, they can condemn property, and I mean, and just let me say it this way, and I can get you specific clarity in code section and line by line of where it is in this bill or where it was in this bill or the law. But as a transit plan is created, and let's say we're gonna, you know, build a, you know, BRT down Cumming Highway or whatever the main road is through Forsyth County. As they go through and do that process, they can leverage the powers of eminent domain. Just like sometimes I know it gets sensitive with, you know, DOT around the state when there's projects to where they can almost do a taking if they can't come to a resolution with a landowner. So Greta has these powers. I don't know that they have ever been used, at least since, you know, going back to 2002. I don't know if Governor Barnes and Greta used them, but I know when Governor Perdue was elected going forward, all those powers were mothballed, and I don't know of a governor since then that has expressly used them, brought them to the table for any reason or any board or anything like that. I don't know if, I don't
Yeah, it's been
think-
described to me that Greta has a lot of powers that have not been exercised, but that essentially that, I'm going to use loose terms here, that they could shut down development.
They could.
In the Atlanta area if they wanted to. And so I do think that those probably have been, I think you're probably accurately describing those as dormant powers, because I don't know that the extreme edges they've been utilized, but certainly it's probably something that most people don't realize exists. Any other questions from members of the committee? There is one person signed up to testify, so we'll take that testimony next. I want to recognize Senator Gooch.
Looking at the makeup of this new board, why did you remove the commissioner of the DOT? Why is he not on the board?
I mean, I don't, I mean, we just basically did. I mean, there's no reason. I mean, I know the commissioner's very
That's a-
sensitive to you.
Well, he's sensitive to all 11 million people in Georgia. It should be. As a legislative branch of government, it looks like we're putting all the power to the governor. There's an election in November. No one in this building or on this planet knows who the next governor is going to be.
That's right.
Seems like a lot of power to shift to one person. all of this authority, all the assets, everything that was created by Greta, CERTA, ATL over the years, there's been literally decades of work to get us where we are. Granted, it's not perfect. The
It'll never be
ATL
perfect.
was a 2-year process.
Right.
It started out small study committees. A lot of work was done to get there. It was a big overreach in a lot of areas. So I applaud you for trying to streamline it and make it more efficient. But I'm just wondering, how many people have seen this document before today? How many people at GDOT have been consulted? How many people in the ATL world have been involved? I don't know. I'm not trying to throw water on the bill yet, but
Right.
before I vote for it, I need to get more comfortable that there's been somebody in the transportation world that's helped
Yeah,
put this
I know
together.
in kind of the CERTA ATL world, I mean, they've, as we've had questions, I mean, they're aware, they've, you know, given opinions or thoughts, at least just in how the mechanics of things work, so that's not a surprise. You know, I don't know that we've done a full run-through with GDOT and Josh, but, I mean, most of this doesn't really change too much, except for what you're kind of describing with the board, in terms of the mechanics of what GDOT can and can't do.
Will this board have the ability to borrow money and leverage the assets to a P3 project, for example, like
That
we do today
will
with
be
CERTA?
with DOT.
DOT doesn't have
Well,
authority to
well,
borrow
let
money.
me rephrase it.
Nothing changes with CERTA, I believe, is what your answer was,
Correct.
correct?
I'm sorry, yeah.
So all the borrowing will.
All that, yes, all that
no
stays the
borrowing-
same. I'm sorry,
No
yes.
borrowing is allowed under this board.
All they do is basically receive the federal funds, and then basically how they leverage those federal funds as CERTA is today and as GDOT is today, those things have not changed.
So where's the connect? If they're taking the federal funds, where's the connection to GDOT on the STIP and the TIP process? Because you've got to have.
So the TIP
You-
process will be under the commissioner.
So if the commissioner's not on this board, so where's the authority vest in the board to even listen to the commissioner at
fair.
GDOT? So you know what I'm saying? That's my concern. If we
Right.
don't have the commissioner of the Department of Transportation on this board.
That's fair.
With a strong influence, then I think we're missing an opportunity.
That's good feedback.
And I think that the weight of having the governor's appointments on this is too strong as well. So I don't know how you
That's fine.
fix
I mean,
that
I'm-
today.
Senator Gooch, I was just spitballing something here. I wonder how this lands with you and
Mm-hmm.
the leader. What if you gave and this, Senator Mallow, kind of it would address your concern as well, give the governor 3 appointments, all of which must reside in the compliance zone counties, give the lieutenant governor and the speaker 2 each, one of those 2 from each of them must reside. You would then have the 7-member board with 5 people actually that would live within the area. And then you could have, right now, he's got the governor appointing the chair. You could either have the governor still appoint the chair and have the GDOT commissioner be a vice chair, or you could invert that and have the GDOT commissioner
I just
be
think-
a chair.
I don't think having the commissioner on there should be an option. It should be a must. And it shouldn't be at the pleasure of the governor or the.
I wasn't
lieutenant
saying that. I was saying make
Right.
that an eighth. You could make that an 8th
Absolutely.
member.
It would have to be an additional member. The DOT commissioner, if he's not on this, I can't vote for it today. Just, I feel strongly about that.
Yeah, so in the bill, looking at a couple of notes, so the commissioner is a non-voting member. If you want to make that or bump that up, I mean, I'll leave that up to the committee. The other note.
Where's that line number? Do you have that
I didn't see
handy?
that.
I'd have
either.
to find it.
Okay.
And then Senator Gooch, your other question about TIP approvals. So the TIP approvals will happen with Georgia T, but federal law gives the ultimate TIP approval to the GDOT commissioner.
Well, I think the planning director has the ultimate authority on that with the governor's blessing.
And I think the other part about why we designed the board the way it is as of now is to make sure it conforms with federal highway and federal transit administration law.
So, just for historical purposes, and my brain's a little foggy, the ATL was created as a way to collaborate with all the dozens of different transit systems around the state. primarily in metro Atlanta and North Georgia, you had systems. And if y'all remember BLB, he did this video. He went on a train ride. He went from Cobb County.
Can we
to
talk about the
Gwinnett
video
County.
for a second?
No, we
Please.
don't.
This video is legendary because he had just had shoulder surgery.
That's right. Went
And
viral, didn't it?
It went viral, and it's a different look. So it's worth going. It's worth going and seeing the
He had
style.
long hair then.
In fact, Sydney, will you just Google real quick and see if we can find that video? We don't need. We'll come back to it if you can find it. But
You know, I
it's
think
Senator Beach and Bernie Tokars,
That's right.
and they traveled around. And it took them like 9 hours to
It
get
took 'em all
from
day to do what should have been
from
done.
Gwinnett County to
That's
Cobb
right.
County or something.
So the idea was, let's coordinate, let's communicate, let's create an app, and it grew into what's now the ATL. I mean, you could probably criticize a lot of things that was in that bill, and so I'm not sitting here defending it.
it would be like 20.
No, you're good.
And so I appreciate what you're trying to do, so
Um,
I just don't want us to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
No, but I
there's
mean,
some
if
good
y'all want to
things in there
add,
that need to
you know,
be
the
kept.
commissioner, I mean, as a non-voting member, I mean, I think that's fine.
I think he should be a voting member personally, but I don't want to grow your board back to where it was. You said there
Yeah, I
were
think
11?
we just need to check and see if that is going to have any issue with federal law. I don't know if Josh even knows the answer to that. I don't.
I probably can't imagine.
Yeah. Here, Josh.
Yes. I don't know if I would, I don't know if you would want him to
There's
share
the
it.
there's the
maybe.
video for those that
Mr. Chairman, I
It's a
think
long-
it's
it's a
your
long-
you don't
last,
need to watch it, but
as your last committee, I think you should, you know, let's play videos.
but the version
at
I've
that
seen
line
has him
confirmed
sitting in
with
an office with
Gina.
he had a sling on from having had shoulder surgery.
He made a valid point. in
Yeah,
his
and it was
voice-
a
in
good
his-
illustration
yeah,
of how difficult
that's
it
right.
was.
And it was a problem, and it's better than it was, but
So
State Senate where I chair.
yeah, we don't need to roll.
Mute it and let it run.
So I'm trying to solve on the fly here, Senator Gooch. I think you've got a couple options. I would agree that having a heavier piece of influence on the board from the President, the Senate, and the Speaker is probably wise.
yes.
So they each have one. If you change each of them to 2, you can change the governor to 3. If the governor's 3 all had to resign in the county within the compliance zone, and then 1 each from the speaker and
Non-voting.
the lieutenant governors of theirs 2 had to reside, that gives you then 5 that reside, and at least 5, I should say, that reside out of your 7, which gets to Senator Mallow's concern. Then we just need to reverse engineer what you want to do with the GDOT commissioners. He,
So it'd be,
So, yeah, so we just talked, and because he has oversight over the federal funds, he has to be a non-voting member.
he cannot vote.
Correct.
Okay, so he would be an ex
Because of
officio,
compliance.
non-voting member. Is that currently, or at least it doesn't need to be ex, so he could be a non-voting member. Is that currently in this
I don't think so.
language?
That
Okay.
part, I don't think so.
I don't,
Jenna, can you work on a part 4, please, after 190? It would be an amendment. Would you be? So I think at a minimum, we're going to go in the direction of making the GDOT commissioner a member of the board, but he would be a non-voting member. And does that work, Josh, as far as you know? He can be he can be a member, but as long as it's not.
Because this entity operates transit. GDOT does the safety oversight for transit, so I believe under law, he's non-voting like he is on MARTA.
Okay. Mr. Leader, what do you think about this shift away from your 5-1-1 setup to going with a 3-2-2, requiring all 3 of the governor's picks to live within a county that's in the compliance zone, allowing and requiring 1 of the 2 from each of the president of the Senate and the speaker to be within a county? That would give you 5 voting members that are within a county, which gets to Senator Mallow's first question.
Yeah, we can give it a shot. I'm not aware of a conflict right now.
Okay. When we get to the part of making motions, we can discuss that further. Are there any other questions from the committee? All right, I do have one person signed up to testify. Jennifer, why don't you come just to the podium here? We'll go ahead and turn your mic on, and you can let us know what you think. You got the mic.
Thank you for your time. Jennifer LaRosa with MARTA, Senior Director of Government Community Affairs, and all my comments take in consideration, we have not seen this bill, and it is a lot of changes. I will say that we were neutral to the overarching existence of the ATL in the previous renditions of this, and I do have concerns around the formula funds, or the federal funds that you're talking about, because our understanding is these formula funds are very restricted to who they go to and how they're spent, and otherwise, prior to the ATL's existence, we were the recipients as a direct recipient of federal funds. We would disseminate those funds in the region. Per the guidelines of those funds, we did not hold back the eligible administrative set-aside that the ATL does. We did do the low-income set-aside with a very transparent and competitive process for those funds. We would love to see whoever is going to be controlling these funds, we're happy to take them back if that's the case for the region. But if any other entity is going to continue to do so, some transparency of that competitive process. For instance, we have not seen those funds for the past 2 years, but they are set aside and kept. So
What do you mean when you say you haven't seen them for the last 2 years?
we have not been recipients of the funds that
I
were
see.
set aside for those low-income funds, or set aside for the formula
So
funds.
who's the designated recipient of those funds currently?
The ATL is, yeah.
Okay. So there's some funds that y'all are dedicated recipients for, and some funds that the ATL is a dedicated recipient for?
We are a direct recipient, which means we can receive
Direct,
federal
okay.
funds for certain circumstances, like a project whenever we apply for a federal grant specifically for us. But the formula funds, which are based on, are only given to transit providers based on service that we gave a year or two prior. So we have to turn in the service we provided, and then the federal government has a formula that they decide how much we get then after.
And that
Those
right
all
now
flow
is-
through
It's
ATL.
flowing through the ATL, which
And-
was, I think, one of the primary purposes of when they set it up of at least one of the things that they were envisioned to be able to handle.
Right. And so they do keep an administrative fee in the low-income set-aside that they're eligible for. And so
How
we
much
would
is that
just,
administrative fee, do you know?
I think total between the two of them, it's about 4.234 million a year.
Out of how much?
In 2025, 31.
Okay, so call it 15%. And your question would be whether this new entity does the same thing or not.
Correct. And if it does, all we would request is some transparency behind those processes and where those funds are going.
Okay, got it.
I will also say that MARTA only receives 2 regular funding sources. This is one of them, the other being the sales tax for the penny. And so these funds are crucial to our daily operations on a regular basis and our state of good repair program. And so I would also echo Senator Mallow and Senator Gooch's feelings about having some representation from the region on the board, especially GDOT. Russell is currently an ex officio on MARTA, CERTA, and the ATL, and so I would appreciate that change, especially with the transit trust funds, not having, again, not read the bill and seeing how those would be overseen, having some regional representation on the funds, and those locals choosing those projects would be nice.
Okay. I'm not sure, is that an extra folder, Senator Burns, next to you? I wonder if we can get her a copy of the bill. Leader Anavitarte, did you hear, I know there's some crosstalk going on as well. Did you hear what she was asking relative to essentially transparency around and I'm not super tight in these terms, but the dedicated recipient funds, and then right now she's saying that the ATL keeps about 4 million of the 32, I think you said, or 31 million. A piece of that for basically an administrative fee, and then a piece of that is for some sort of low-income appropriation that they do outside of that. Does this bill address either of those things? And if not, it's probably something that needs to be considered. I think that your request was essentially a publishing of what that is.
A very transparent, competitive process for the funds, which is
Okay.
outlined in the federal formula law.
Okay. Turn you back on there, Warren.
No, I appreciate it. So, According to my notes, when I have, I mean, it relates to MARTA, all of its FTA formula funds since 18, when the designated recipient was changed, TATL, they have received. I'm not aware that MARTA has received any state transit trust fund dollars from things like the Uber and Lyft fees, for example. That's what I mean. And then I think in terms of the $4 million, I mean, we went back and looked, and I think the real number, in terms of administrative fees, is probably less than $2 million. So I think there's.
Yeah, she was
needs to be a-
combining, I think, two numbers on
Two
that,
numbers,
right?
right?
On that 4 million was combining this low-income piece
Okay.
plus the administrative fee.
Right.
So do you envision the administrative fee staying with this GT?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and there's no withholding of the funds in terms of TTF funds for administrative usage.
Anything else you wanted to add? Any questions for Jennifer? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you for your testimony. Any other questions for? Yes. Number five.
I think it's been brought up by text that the Commissioner of DOT can be a voting member of this board, so I would recommend we make that amendment at the appropriate time. And
Okay.
I'll let the majority leader explain that if you would like, so,
Because
So-
he won't have oversight over heavy rail.
that's right.
Okay.
So I think you're reducing the number of appointments by the governor, making the Commissioner of DOT an active voting member of this board would be appropriate.
If we did what I
My
talked
opinion.
about and you did that, you'd have 8 members. Is that give anybody heartburn, or is that you comfortable with that? We could discuss it when we get to that point, but say it again.
Make it bigger.
It would.
You gotta take it from somewhere.
Let's get to a motion on this, and then we can discuss it at that time, if that works for everybody. Any other questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion. Got a motion from Senator Burns of due pass on LC 395117S. Is there a second? Got a second from Senator Dixon. Any discussion? Senator Burns. Why don't you grab 3 there?
Just a comment, and I want to thank the leader for bringing the bill. This is a process, and we recognize that we've got to continue the process. I think the discussion's been positive. I think we've learned a lot. I think as we move forward, it's going to see refinement. I do support perhaps a friendly amendment on the DOT commissioner being part of this board.
Thank you, Senator. Recognize Senator Mallow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For me, with restructuring transit boards, I've done it a few times. I think if we went and took this 7-member board to a 9-member board, codified the GDOT commissioner and add an additional appointment in there, that would give us the flexibility. But I just want to make sure, however we structure it, that the majority of the appointees are affected in the affected counties, so that people who are non-affected don't get appointed to a board and make decisions in communities they don't live in. And I think it's important, as those 13 counties know what's best in transit, they all work together, cooperate. So however we could structure that, I would think a 9-member board would be applicable, especially for the large nature of the funds that they would be deciding.
So if I were to spitball what you're talking about, you could give the governor 4. You could require that 3 of the governor's 4 live within the area. You give the speaker and the lieutenant governor each 2, require that 1 of theirs both live in the area, so that would give you 5 that live in the area. Then you would have a line number 4 that you would add, making the commissioner of GDOT a member. That would give you a 9-member board, at least 5 members of which would live within the a compliance zone county.
I think you read my mind, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. No, they get 2. They each get 2, and then 1 would be in the area for each of them.
Is that,
No, I think it's great. Okay. Thank you, Derek.
Mr. Chair, at the appropriate time,
Recognize you for a motion.
I move to amend LC 395117S to amend lines 186 and renumerate accordingly, with the governor having 4 appointments, with 3 residing in a county within the compliance zone, the Lieutenant Governor, President of the Senate having 2 appointments with 1 residing in a county within the compliance zone, the Speaker of the House having 2 appointments with 1 residing within a county within the compliance zone, and 1 appointment would be the GDOT Commissioner, which should then also maybe be appointed by the governor, because there has to be a body that appoints the GDOT Commissioner. So making. Oh, now with transportation, okay, perfect. So then 1 GDOT Commissioner.
I would accept that as a motion, but I think that you should change your language to be at least 3, at least 1, and at least 1. That way you don't preclude the
Absolutely.
Lieutenant Governor or Speaker from having 2 of their 2 be within a county.
I like that amendment, and that's in my amendment. so-
Jenna, does that give you something to work with? Okay.
Perfect.
We have a motion to amend from Senator Mallow. We got a second from Senator Gooch. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. All right, we're now down to the underlying bill. Any other discussion on the underlying bill? We are now at a motion of due pass by substitute as amended on LC 395117S. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. That brings us to the close of this meeting. I'm going to close my very last Senate Transportation meeting by asking Sydney, can you put that photo up of, not that one, not that one, that one?
Where is this, Mr.
This is in Forsyth County.
Forsyth County?
Can y'all tell me what you're supposed to do when there's a stop sign and then a yield sign?
I sort of like it. You
You stop
You
you.
just, I guess you pick one.
That's a California style. That's a rolling style.
Yeah, there you go.
That's so true.
And with that, y'all, it's been a pleasure serving with you guys on this committee. Thank you all for a great biennial, and we are adjourned.
Is that a county road or a state road?